If I say that the world is round and someone else says it's flat, that's worth reporting. But you might also want to report on a bunch of scientific evidence that seems to support the notion that the world is round. Seems to support the notion that the world is round.
We feel the benefits of foreign trade right here at home. Each additional $1 billion in manufactured goods and trade means another 20,000 American jobs. And yet, in spite of the fact that last year alone, total gross exports accounted for virtually all of this nation's economic growth, a new breed of isolationists seem to think domestic policy ends at the water's edge. Well, thank God they weren't around back in 1492. Imagine the hard time they've given Christopher Columbus. Voices on the right and left are working right now to breathe life into those old flat earth theories of protectionism, of isolationism, that there is no going back. Our new world is far smaller, communications far more instant, our horizons stretch much farther with each generation. This is 1991, not 1791. Horse and buggy attitude won't carry us into the next century. And we will knock down barriers wherever we find them, to open markets, for instance, for our computer software, movies, books, and pharmaceuticals. We will fight hard against protectionism, both at home and abroad. And 5 centuries ago, a man of courage and vision set sail from Europe, searching for new trade routes and opportunities. And he defied the timid counsel of those who said the earth was flat. Christopher Columbus's voyage to the Americas transformed human history. Columbus was an entrepreneur, and the risk he took 500 years ago continues to pay off abundantly today. And today we still have to combat the flat earth mentality, the mindset that urges us to barricade our borders against competition, to shut off the free exchange of food and machinery and skills and ideas.
Now, I know there are still a few who insist that climate change is one big hoax, even a political conspiracy. My friends, these people are so out of touch with science that they believe rising sea levels don't matter because in their view, the extra water is just going to spill out over the sides of a flat earth. They're wrong, obviously. For the benefit of those who may still question the 97% of peer-reviewed studies on climate change, let me just underscore. You don't need to be a scientist to know that the earth is round, that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and that gravity is the reason that objects fall to the ground. You could pick 100 different examples of simple things that happen every day that reflect science and determinations of science. And you don't need to be a scientist.
Those who argued that the earth was flat. And for a long period of time, people argued that the earth was flat, even when the evidence of astronomers and others and explorers evidenced that it was in fact quite the opposite. And so we have, in effect, with respect to climate change in America today, what is fundamentally a flat earth caucus. A bunch of people, some of them in the United States Congress itself, who still argue against all the science, all the evidence. They argue that somehow we don't know enough about climate change, or they argue that the evidence is sufficient, or they argue that it just is a hoax. I mean, we have members of the United States Senate who argue that it is a hoax.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Everybody, please have a seat. Have a seat. It is wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. It is great to be in Boulder City. You looked around at this flat, beautiful land. And not only because it's flat, transmission lines were already here. The sun is traveling, and there's no haze, and it's absolutely clear. And so now, you'd think, given this extraordinary sight, given the fact that this is creating jobs, generating power, helping to keep our environment clean, making us more competitive globally, you'd think that everybody would be supportive of solar power. That's what you'd think. And yet, if some politicians had their way, there won't be any more public investment in solar energy. There won't be as many new jobs and new businesses. Some of these folks want to dismiss the promise of solar power and wind power and fuel-efficient cars. In fact, they make jokes about it. One member of Congress, who shall remain unnamed, called these jobs phony. Called them phony jobs. I mean, think about that mindset, that attitude that says because something is new, it must not be real. You know, if these guys were around when Columbus set sail, they'd be charter members of the Flat Earth Society. We were just talking about this, the Flat Earth Society. We were just talking about this.
So I'm going to take this opportunity to respond very directly to Barack Obama. Now, let me go a step further. Let's talk Flat Earth Society. I'm just asking the president, who apparently belongs to the Flat Earth Sierra Club Society.
Now, here's the sad thing. Lately, we've heard a lot of professional politicians, a lot of the folks who are, running for a certain office, who shall go unnamed. They've been talking down new sources of energy. They dismiss wind power. They dismiss solar power. They make jokes about biofuels. They were against raising fuel standards. I guess they like gas guzzlers. They think that's good for our future. We're trying to move towards the future. They want to be stuck in the past. And we've heard this kind of thinking before. Let me tell you something. If some of these folks were around when Columbus set sail, they must have been founding members of the Flat Earth Society. They would not have believed that the world was round. They must have been founding members of the Flat Earth Society. They would not have believed that the world was round.
Nobody has a monopoly on what is a very hard problem. But I don't have much patience for anyone who denies that this challenge is real. We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society. We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
Early in the next decade, a set of crewed flights will test and prove the systems required for exploration beyond low Earth orbit. You looked around at this flat, beautiful land, and not only because it's flat, transmission lines were already here. The sun is traveling, and there's no haze, and it's absolutely clear. And so,
if I say that the world is round and someone else says it's flat, that's worth reporting. But you might also want to report on a bunch of scientific evidence that seems to support the notion that the world is round.
It's amazing to watch the White House continue to argue that the Earth is flat.
They argue that it just is a hoax. I mean, we have members of the United States Senate who argue that it is a hoax.
which both supports and counters scientific theory or hypothesis,
There is no scientific
and
evidence that
assists
counters it.
students in developing critical thinking skills to evaluate scientific theories and hypotheses. The legislature recognizes that the teaching of certain scientific topics, such as climate science, may be controversial. The legislature encourages the teaching of such scientific controversies to be made in an objective manner with both strengths and weaknesses of such scientific theory or hypothesis.
We, the legislature, recognize that there is a debate about whether
Critical
the Earth
thinking.
is round or flat.
No.
And
You
let's
said-
encourage critical thinking by saying there should be a legitimate debate between whether the Earth is round or flat. Because after all, any idiot can walk outside and look and see that it's flat.
Why are we going to waste our time with flat Earth people? Now, unfortunately, he still seems to have a soft spot for Giuliani, or he's just doing his job.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. You are good.
Take a listen at what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said at the New Jersey concert.
So I'm going to tell you this, that the next time you see John Stossel or Glenn Beck or Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity, these flat earthers.
With Hot Air, author of the Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming, Chris Horner, the president and founder of the Global Warming Conference, John Cleveland, and from Natural Resource Defense Council, John Koisman is with us. John, welcome back.
Good to see you.
First of all, he not only said that about me, flat earthers, corporate toad.
Instead, you've chosen to travel the country calling people like Jonathan Isaac and others, myself included, flat earthers. We find that very insulting, goes against the science. Are you a doctor or a medical doctor? Not a medical doctor. Do you have a science degree? And yet you travel the country calling people flat earthers who have had COVID, looked at studies of millions of people, and made their own personal decision that their immunity they naturally acquired is sufficient. Hold them down and vaccinate them. Do you want to apologize for calling those people flat earthers?
Years ago, before the pandemic, before much of this, I got fascinated with the idea of flat earthers. Now, this is an entirely new phenomenon. There wasn't really any moment back in recorded history, not the ancient Greeks or the ancient Babylonians or the Incas or whoever else, who actually wondered whether the Earth was actually flat or not. And Christopher Columbus, they knew the Earth was round. There was no danger he was going to fall off the edge of the world. That wasn't what people worried about when he was setting off to discover the Americas or discover a shortcut to India. But recently, over the past few years, a whole bunch of people have decided that the world is flat. Now, everything we know about science, from the people we've sent to the moon, to the photos we've taken from space, to how we explain day versus night and seasons, we know that the Earth is round. But there are a whole bunch of people out there who have decided that the Earth is flat. And they hang out with each other, and they find different ways of proving to themselves that the Earth is flat. Now, that may not seem like a very serious thing, because someone who believes the Earth is flat is not going to necessarily cause tremendous harm to everyone else. But the ability to start to believe something that simply isn't true, because enough people are telling you and reinforcing that around you, actually starts creating real problems. But if someone says the Earth is flat, you can see extensive YouTube pages devoted by people who've decided, and this is a recent phenomenon over the past decade or so, that the Earth is flat, because their experience as they look out to the horizon.
Rockets everywhere this morning, while outdoing his fellow billionaires in the race to space. Amazon boss Jeff Bezos will blast into orbit next month.
Do you know what they call that?
A rocket.
They call it Blue Origin. Does that look a little odd to you? It's just me. Joining us now for more is US correspondent Alison Petrowski. Ali, the Bezos flight will officially kick off the company's space tourism business.
Yes, that's right, Carl. Good morning to you, Carl. Good morning to you, Ali. Launch of the interesting shaped rocket, thanks for pointing that out, Carl, will happen on July 20 out of remote.
Go, Jeff. Go, Mark. Go, Wally. Go, Oliver. You are going to space.